Ladies and gentlemen, now our student speaker, our doctoral student speaker is Sandra Hertenbach. Sandra's with Transnet. Okay, she has more than 10 years, or 10 decades, 3 decades, sorry. Of experience in the South African rail industry, and she's been in various strategic positions. She decided this year that she was going to embark on her PhD studies, and her topic is imperatives for advancing freight intermodalism in South Africa, a systems approach. So Sandra is very in an early stage of her study, so please feel free to interject, to ask questions, to contribute as we go along. This is not a presentation, so it's a colloquium, so she's going to... You can come here, Sandra, please.
I can't talk sitting down.
Sure. Oh, you understand? Okay. Feel free.
No, it's fine. Okay.
You don't want to present. You can talk.
That's what I'm used to. But perhaps I can start by just defining exactly what I mean when I talk about freight intermodalism. We use the term loosely, and it's defined as using 2 or more transport modes to move freight seamlessly between an origin and a destination in a manner that you reduce the handling of that cargo. So using packaging such as containerization, palletization, some form of unitization, consolidate the cargo using multimodal technologies to convey it from one point to another. Now, when you think of intermodalism, you would also realize that it's a system that has to work across many modes: road, rail, shipping. It goes between various facilities, distribution centers, port terminals, port authorities at an import and export country. All of that requires coordination, collaboration, cooperation between the various entities, between the actors in that system. You talk about, just in your introduction, about business models and about technology dehumanizing, but it's something like freight intermodalism actually requires that the participants interact. They have to make that freight flow seamlessly. The technology may enable them to do it better. The technology advances the way they become more efficient, the way they generate more profits, and the way that they actually, distribute those profits. And I think that goes back to your argument about the profit and the benefit. Making the system efficient so that you have these profits, so that they can be distributed in a manner that society benefits, that the people of the country benefit, that the environment benefits. So it's all 3 of those things. And I think an improved or advanced freight intermodalism system could contribute to that.
So I would like to ask on that, do we have examples of well-integrated freight intermodalism?
Do we have examples of it?
Globally?
Yes, all over there. It's more advanced in the States and also very much in Europe, in the Scandinavian countries, and in Europe it's interesting because it's across countries,
okay. So
not just across
So there are
modes.
examples of this intermodalism? So what do you want to do with that?
I want to say, look at it from a systems perspective. And perhaps I can just take a step back and go to some of the problems that we have in our country, where because the system isn't as optimal as it could be, you have rail corridors, rail assets being underutilized, you have roads being overburdened. Wherever you look, there's a new distribution center or a warehouse popping up. Are they all being fully utilized? Do we still carry on building another lane on the highway, another building, another warehouse? Or are there ways that we can work together to optimize that system? And I believe that the way to optimize it is by looking at it at a systems view. Because typically, these actors in the system would behave in a manner that advances their own individual goals, their own ideals. And we need that. We need the road hauliers to be operating as cost effectively and efficiently as they can. We need the railway to be acting efficiently. We need port and terminal operators to be working efficiently, improving the way they operate, introducing new technologies, new ways of doing things. But each of those individual ones working on their own don't necessarily add up to a collective system that works well together. And that's the premise of my study.
So, if I may ask, just follow on, but then, if the system, this intermodalism exists, what is going to be new in terms of, I know you're mentioning systems all the time, are you just going to apply the model that exists or the frame that exists into a South African context? So as a doctoral student, we want to see the newness and knowledge in and some kind of original contribution. So what do you envisage is going to be an output from this particular study field?
Okay, when I say that, so that other countries are way more advanced than we are, and we should be doing better. And for the past 20 years, all of our policies have indicated a strategic intent of moving towards greater intermodalism, of cooperating, of developing models where we work together and we don't implement. I'm saying that if we could find a framework or a manner of getting the actors to have a collective view, and that isn't necessarily a perfect view, a utopian view of we all working for the common good, but a collective view that says this is what would be right for the organization, and not for just for the organization, but for the country, so that we can contribute to addressing some of the mega challenges that the country faces.
So I was saying, Krishna, you guys must come in that she wants to how is the system operating and maybe what is not there if compared to what's elsewhere, and then systemically what do we need to do to advance intermodalism. So let me get technical on it. So are you going to do inductive, deductive, abductive research? Let's speak a bit of thesis language here.
I think it is abductive, and
okay.
Maybe I must explain how.
Good.
Okay, and you've said I say system all the time. It's true, but if you look at the kinds of attributes of a system, like there's many actors, there's many variables, there's many interdependencies and links. A system looks at hard aspects, it looks at soft aspects, but it's more about what are the interventions and what are the levers that can be introduced to optimize the system. That's if we accept that it isn't optimal, which it really isn't. And so finding things that aren't necessarily a R1 billion infrastructure project to create more capacity, but perhaps a smaller and more creative intervention that would lead to improvement and optimization. So when we say abductive, so it's starting with this theoretical framework, almost the philosophy of systems thinking, and then applying those concepts to the way our system works, to develop a framework or an approach that would give the implementation side of it a push, that would mobilize and perhaps catalyze, if I can.
So to ensure that you don't get stuck in a project, you know, my thing around projects. So I want to ask you deliberately, do you think if you infuse it with the ideas of being maybe a combination of exploratory and explanatory, because you talk abductive, which means the inductive, deductive,
Yes.
do you think that could assist you in moving away from just seeing this as a project? Because you're in that workspace, and you could potentially get trapped in that space.
Project mode.
Yes, project mode. Whereas we want you to write a thesis around this.
No, I don't want to get trapped in a project mode, and I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to build the whole story and build the whole argument.
Okay.
Because it's more about the underlying collaboration, the cooperation, the human behaviors that would make this project thing work. It's not just a project thing. That would make the system work. Because, and it's about individualism versus a collective view, a common view. And I believe that that's one of the key things that is missing, is this almost a selfish aim and an individualistic view of striving for a profit, rather than seeing what could be right, what could be better, what really should be done in the bigger interest of the country, in the bigger interest of the transport and logistics sector, so that it fulfills its role that it should play in the growth of the economy and in the transformation of the economy.
Sandra, the importance of your area of the intermodal, the focus on intermodal activities is extremely important. Now, I just want to say why I believe that it is so important. Some years back, I was involved in a study in Kenya looking at the Rift Valley Railway, which was it's the old railway. There's still the Cape Gauge still operated there. It was a very slow route from Mombasa up to Nairobi, and the Chinese were putting in a high-speed rail, which in fact is now operating. And so the Rift Valley Railway was looking for a new investor and a buyer. And the question was, how does one cope with the fact that you've got a high-speed Chinese rail running parallel with your route? What is it? And we actually did some studies, and we found out that in moving goods from A to B, the rail journey was actually not that significant. What was significant was the first mile and the last mile, which is the intermodal
Exactly.
And if you can advance our understanding of those systems so that the time taken for some goods to migrate from one mode of transport to the other, if that can be accelerated, then you will make a magnificent contribution to our economy.
And that's exactly it. So we talk about the benefits of that integration between modes, between road and rail, to complete that seamless journey for first and last mile. But it hasn't advanced. There aren't many solutions like that. In fact, we're moving goods all the time, but it's not being done in a way that we best utilize our capacity. And people will say, oh, it's more expensive to use road and rail than to use road alone. And does that not mean that there are ways of working together and finding a different business model such that you actually achieve that intermodalism? Why isn't it happening?
That's why I think
and I believe it's about the actors, and it's about us not looking at the holistic view, at the whole picture. It's more, it's because we and as rail and road and port operators tend to look inwardly at our own view and not at that.
The more systemic one.
A more systemic view that considers a greater good.
Mike?
You've got, and a system, by definition, has things inside the system and they have things outside the system. And you've got to define what is inside the system. And I think, and we talked about it long and hard, is that it has to be about South African incorporated.
Exactly.
And not just the wheels and the warehouse and things like that.
Yeah.
Because the politicians play a huge role in terms of defining the rules and the incentives, in terms of how this thing is working. And it's not working because of all these vested interests. And I think you would do the country a service if you could develop a framework model which would now start to bring all these parties together, in an objective way, and leave the baggage at the door, so we can talk about developing a structured model.
Exactly.
Back to 1994, I think it was 1996, where the Department of Transport, the first intelligent thing they did was undertake the Moving South Africa survey, which was the first time that thing has ever been done. Where they looked at what was moving where, how, and then they came up with proposed strategies which government then threw in the rubbish bin and didn't apply. They separated freight from passengers, which became another issue. And so there has been some good work there, but you've got to start with South African Incorporated, and get
exactly.
the various parties involved. I'm sitting on lots of committees and things like that. We'd be happy to support you in terms of trying to get that forum together, and then start taking it from there. But the goal has to be South African Incorporated, as opposed to...
It's exactly that, and that is exactly what I'm trying to do. How do you get all of these actors to share that South African Incorporated view? And because that, which is for me what lifts it from a project that says make these pieces work together more efficiently. It's about seeing that bigger view at a South Africa level because of the benefit that it can play in the country.
Perhaps, Sandra, you want to list some of the questions you have. Someone here? Yes. Some of the questions you have that you'll try to answer through your study, and people get a better understanding of the study. Let's give the opportunity.
I actually thought maybe looking at the type of systems approach becomes much broader, because I've been listening to the interconnectedness of all the structures that you're trying to bring through, and perhaps I would have thought that you reduce it down to systemic. Otherwise, you end up maybe coming up with 3 or 4 books.
I just want to make a comment there. Thanks for that one, because I was curious to know, are you talking systems or are you talking systemic?
Systemic.
Okay, that's fine.
that narrows it.
It is a system that has a systemic way of operating and of functioning and of collapsing and backfiring and.
And I would just be curious if you want to look at the work of Bronfenbrenner, because Bronfenbrenner had an interesting systemic thinking framework. Bronfenbrenner. Bronfenbrenner. He spoke about the 4 domains: the micro, the meso, the exo, and the macro. Because I think, as your colleagues are saying here, people, there's a lot of stakeholder engagement. And it will be interesting to see how can you demarcate it in either the meso or the exo system. It just gives you a little bit of a palette, a little bit of a backdrop, how to work with the data. So if you can just look at that.
Maybe I must talk a little bit about how.
Yep.
And obviously the literature review that identifies such approaches, what would be a good way to tackle this at a systemic level to get that South Africa view. And from that, diagrammatically map the system with who's in it and who's out of it, as you've indicated, the boundaries, how it works, how it fits, who influences, who wields power, who can force changes, who lobbies, who works against each other, those kinds of attributes. And to get that right, I would hope to speak to people who aren't exactly actors in the system, but academics that write about intermodalism, people, project industrial engineers, those kinds of people that see it from the outside, get their views. And then the key part of it would be to hold 2 focus groups, and 2 so that the results are more valid, but to try to get a dynamic discussion going around that diagram to see if that would surface some interventions or levers that could be applied. And that discussion would take place with people who are actually working in the system. So somebody representing a couple of the logistics service providers, the rail, the road, the ports, the people that provide the infrastructure, the technology, the IT systems, get them in a room and try to stimulate, facilitate a debate that gets them thinking beyond this project thing to that more collective view of a greater good for the system.
So you will propose to use some kind of mixed methods approach?
Pardon?
Mixed methods approach?
Yes, it's
I
would describe it as a mixed methods approach with the subject matter expert interviews, followed by, and starting with the literature review, then the focus groups, and then consolidate and synthesize that data to build the framework that would suggest the way of acting. And not just the theoretical do's and don'ts. It's not about getting that list of critical success factors, but trying to get actors to have a realization of how it could be better if they cooperated and collaborated.
It's actually kind of exciting topic coming out of the logistics kind of, just being an observer in terms of, how modes of transport in South Africa actually interlink or rather don't interlink. I get a sense from what you're saying, you're looking at a systemic approach in terms of how the moving parts actually influence a collaborative and a structured approach going forward. But layered on that, in the whole systemic component, and they realize with the complexities regarding matters that could be or couldn't be controlled at a specific point in time, i.e. the cost factors, the safety aspects, capacity, reliability of a intermodalization context within South Africa, and then also the environment components, and how do all of that actually play a part in terms of how these actors make a decision, and how does it influence their thinking? Because depending on where they are in terms of their systems, any one of these could be a priority or not. And one of the key priorities that as a system they should think about is it cost, is it safety, is it environment, an environmentally friendly, capability. So I think it's going to be quite interesting to see how you actually pull all of that together. Because everyone, to your point, would have to come.
Okay. No, those are some of the things to consider.
Spoke about the meso, macro, those kind of things.
Yeah.
That how they all connect. Any more questions? Yes. Thank you, young lady.
I just want to add to the points that you put across to consider in terms of the agenda and what the actors in and outside of the system are driving the decision making. The idea of jobs as well is a sensitive discussion in South Africa. So the advancement, and we've seen before IR, there's that fear of that. If they advance something, make it better, make it more efficient, etc., it means less employment opportunities. And I think that's a very big factor to consider in terms of what it is that drives this decision makers. Because they might be looking at good ideas, good solutions, good ways of interlinking and making things work better. But that's not a priority right now because we need to keep people employed. And it would be good to know the thinking behind that. In terms of, do we keep people employed, for how long do we keep them employed, and how long can we sustain the status quo? Because it's clearly not working. Versus the sacrifice that needs to be made now starting to move forward, and how we then bring people along.
Okay. Say sorry.
And currently, as you know, the status of Transnet is not doing well. So I wonder where the funding will come from, whether we'll buy the MPA, because it's not doing well.
Yeah, I think we're drifting to the ESCOM Transnet debate. We know what happened to ESCOM recently. So let's just focus on what's it. Yes, Mike?
Just a couple of things. I think what you need to do is develop a theoretical model at each of those levels, so the macro, the metro, things like it, how it should work in a perfect world. Because you've got to be careful you don't get sucked into all the day-to-day operating problems. So at the different levels, this is the way it should work. This is the way it is or isn't working at all of those levels here, because that will give you the gaps in terms of what need to be addressed. Okay. That's the one. Just the good point, I think, like I've just mentioned, it is that I sit on the judges panel for the Logistics Achievement Award, and Transnet in fact got 2 awards this year, which was last month. Well, this month. One of which was multimodal. Okay, you've now converted the citrus fruit, which used to go to port by road. It's now Marble Hall and Messina, whatever, which is collected now by road, taken to a railhead, and then railed to the port. So you're already sort of putting your toes in the water and things like that. Which is working.
But Mike, I'm curious to ask Sandra, the fellow, Tabo, and I want you to help. Do you get a sense that she's making an assumption that freight, what it is today, will change, or is in the process of changing, or will be the same in the next 10, 20 years? Is she potentially creating a systemic solution for what is now, or for what may be totally different? What is your sense?
What is to say freight would have to play a different role given what else is going on. Because of 4IR, 5IR, we need to us quicker. some by roads found, some by rail. And those that should get to us by rail probably will get vehicles. So the more we stay on OIR and consuming goods on the electronic means or through the electronic media, it has to get to us somehow. So the way we transport goods now will have to be different the way we transport goods in the future.
Okay, so
therefore, she's making a future probably assumptions
So that's something, but I almost wish you could stretch us a little bit more, but Edward, let me try. So do you think freight will look the same in 20 years from now? Will there be roads and rail? No, I don't want to ask you.
I want to answer that.
Would freight look the same 20 years from now?
Well, I think good afternoon. I think there will be road and rail, but I think...
And just that?
No. I think the mix in logistics will look significantly different. All I have to add to that is drones. And all I have to add to that is the dematerialization of value chains and 3D printing, which will influence logistics. So there's many of those aspects that comes from disruptive innovation that will fundamentally change the mix with new modes that comes to it. As I said, both hopefully in South Africa, at the moment the mix is about 27% rail to road, which is even by current standards is significantly under-capacitated in terms of rail. So there's still room for rail to increase rather than to decrease. But I think the current mental models for logistics should be disrupted.
And I just want to sort of put it on your lap and say, Sandra, from a DaVinci point, you can consider a bit of that futuristic thing. What if the world had drones or whatever?
Yeah. Now, I think in South Africa, the way we move things would change and the kinds of freight that we move would change. So we focused a lot on how well we can export coal on our heavy haul lines, for example, where the way the world is going, people shop online, they demand things at their door, they must have this kind of pen, and which creates the need for all sorts of movement of goods all over the country. If you look at some of the developments that people are writing about, while we trying to optimize intermodalism, you read about experiments and pilot projects in Europe where they're talking synchromodality, which says you book your freight mode neutral, and because everything's connected, it will find its way to the best mode and the most available capacity. So instead of waiting for the road truck that you've booked, the system will say, but there's a train going that way, let's put the container on the train, or the other way. So which also says this requires serious cooperation and collaboration. Not only, some of it can be done by digital means, digital technologies, but the business models that you develop for freight that's going to move like that, who will own the customer? Who gets the revenue? How do you share that revenue for a container that left China and landed in Rustenburg by some means of... And then there's another guy that talks about the physical internet, which says he uses the digital internet as an analogy for how freight will move in the future. So with identification tags on it, with modular units, not big
virtual modes,
containers. So it's almost, the physical internet almost goes beyond this idea of synchromodality.
All right. Thank you very much, Sandra. I want to round up. Sorry, it's the last question. I think the speaker is here.
I'm actually curious to know why we are seeing two different futures. You are seeing a future where emerging market space like South Africa, there's all these good technologies. Prof mentioned drones and so on and so forth. However, I'm seeing a different type of painting on the wall. What I'm seeing is an African continent that's emerging. That's emerging, that's emerging due to inter-Africa trade. But when you look at these separate states that are sovereign in their nature, these states basically do not have those infrastructures you're talking about. So I'm actually seeing growth in terms of the good old road network and freight, more than the drones that we seem to be picturing in an emerging market space. For South Africa to actually have growth, we're a bit saturated as South Africa. For us to have growth, we have to be outside South Africa. That's the future that I'm seeing.
All right, thank you very much. I'm sure you digested that, Sandra. And of course, I think the key word you mentioned, the customer. Towards the latter part, you mentioned the customer. End of the day, it's about satisfying and about delighting the customer. So all these things we're talking about is for delivery. Okay. I think it's you got more ideas now to go and rethink what you're doing.
In Mother of it, like you always tell me.
All right, and good luck with your studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you.